You were never taught how to earn loyalty. You were taught how to deserve it. You were told to be kind, to be consistent, to be present, and that if you were good enough, loyal enough, giving enough, people would stay. That is the lie they fed you. And it is the exact reason the people you loved most have left, betrayed you, or simply stopped caring. Devotion is not earned through goodness. It is manufactured through psychology. And the moment you understand that, everything you thought you knew about human relationships collapses. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago, sitting in a cold house in San Casciano, stripped of his position, tortured by the Florentine government he once served. And he still wrote the most ruthless manual on human nature ever produced. Not because he was bitter, because he saw clearly. He watched good men lose everything and cold strategists build empires, and he refused to lie about what he observed. This video will show you the architecture of devotion, the psychological mechanics behind why people commit, why they stay, and how that commitment is manufactured, not discovered. If you are looking for a self-help pep talk, close this now. Go back to the crowd. But if you want to understand what is actually happening beneath the surface of every human relationship you have ever had, stay. Because what comes next cannot be unseen. You were brainwashed to believe that loyalty is a virtue that flows naturally toward deserving people. Religion reinforced this. Schools rewarded this belief. Your parents modeled it, or pretended to. Society built an entire mythology around the idea that if you are simply good, people will be loyal to you. That mythology destroyed you quietly. The truth that Machiavelli articulated in The Prince is this: it is better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. He was not writing fantasy. He was writing an autopsy of human behavior. He watched princes who were loved get overthrown the moment conditions changed. He watched feared rulers hold power through crisis after crisis. He documented what actually works, not what people wish worked. Robert Greene, in the 48 Laws of Power, extended this framework into something modern and precise. Law 1. Never outshine the master. Law 17. Keep others in suspended terror. These are not suggestions for villains. They are observations about what generates psychological grip, what makes one person orbit another with intensity and commitment. The mechanisms of loyalty are not moral. They are neurological. They are social. They are architectural. And I am going to show you exactly how to build them. Phase 1. Scarcity is the foundation of devotion. Most people give too much, too fast, too consistently. The average man believes that generosity creates loyalty. It creates dependency, not devotion. There is a difference. Dependency is passive. Devotion is active. Devotion requires hunger. Behavioral psychology has a name for this: variable ratio reinforcement. B.F. Skinner identified it as the most powerful schedule of reward known in psychological science. It is the same mechanism behind gambling addiction. When rewards are unpredictable, when warmth, attention, approval come irregularly and without a clear pattern, the brain does not disengage. It escalates. It becomes obsessive. It begins to work harder, invest more, think about you more. Cosimo de Medici mastered this without ever reading Skinner. He was the most powerful man in Florence for decades, and he ran the city not through public display of power, but through strategic withdrawal. He was present when he chose to be, silent when silence served him, and generous on terms that he dictated. People orbited him because his attention meant something. It was scarce, it was unpredictable, and they never stopped trying to earn it.
Your practical instruction. Stop being available on demand. Introduce deliberate gaps in your response. Not cruelty, calibration. When someone expects warmth, give them neutrality. When they expect neutrality, give them something unexpected. Never let your emotional temperature be predicted. The moment you become predictable, you become furniture. Because the next phase is where most people destroy themselves without realizing it. Phase 2. The person who needs nothing controls everything. Neediness is not just unattractive, it is structurally disempowering. The 99% leak their leverage every time they reveal what they want, what they fear losing, and who they cannot live without. And then they wonder why the other person stops respecting them. Attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby and later expanded by researchers like Mary Ainsworth, demonstrates that humans categorize their relationships based on perceived security and availability. Anxious attachment, the most common pattern, drives people to seek constant reassurance and signal high need. And high need in human psychology communicates low value. Not because the person is low value, but because the brain reads scarcity as worth and abundance as worthless. The sovereign strategist understands this completely. He is not cold because he lacks feeling. He is cold because he has disciplined his signals. He lets nothing out that he did not choose to release. Napoleon Bonaparte operated on this principle ruthlessly. He was intensely devoted to the people he valued, but never visibly, never openly, never in ways that transferred power to them. The moment a general or advisor began to feel irreplaceable, Napoleon found a way to demonstrate that he was not. Josephine was the great exception, and it cost him. When he allowed himself to signal need, visible, emotional, unguarded need, she stopped respecting the relationship. He overcorrected into cruelty. But the lesson is embedded in the dynamic. Need transfers power, and power transferred is influence lost. Your practical instruction. Identify the 3 people in your life to whom you have most visibly signaled need. In your next interaction with each of them, say 30% less than you normally would. Respond to their emotional bids with calm acknowledgement rather than matching energy. Hold the temperature of the room steady rather than spiking with them. Watch what happens to their investment in you over the next 2 weeks. Phase 3. People are loyal to who they are when they are with you. This is the one that most people never discover. You do not manufacture loyalty by being impressive. You manufacture it by making the other person feel like a specific version of themselves, a version they prefer, a version they are afraid to lose access to. Robert Cialdini, in his work on influence and commitment, identified a mechanism called identity-consistent behavior. Humans are deeply motivated to behave in ways that are consistent with who they believe themselves to be. When you help someone construct a self-image in relation to you, when they begin to see themselves as your trusted advisor, your confidant, your equal in a select circle, they will defend that identity. And defending the identity means maintaining the relationship. Julius Caesar was a master of this architecture.
He made his lieutenants feel like architects of history, not soldiers following orders. He gave them ownership of battles in his name, then attributed victories publicly to their strategy and character. They did not just fight for him, they fought for who they were when they stood beside him. Betrayal would have required them to betray their own self-concept. Your practical instruction. In your next significant conversation, ask a question that positions the other person as someone with rare insight, not flattery, strategic framing. I wanted your read on this specifically because you see things others miss. Then listen completely. Do not redirect to yourself. Let them inhabit the identity you offered. Over repeated interactions, they will associate your presence with their best self-perception. That association becomes anchor. That anchor becomes loyalty. Comment below. I manufacture nothing. I build architecture. Phase 4. Manufactured mystery creates psychological gravity. The average man explains himself. He justifies, defends, clarifies, contextualizes. He believes transparency creates trust. What it actually creates is the dissolution of projection. And projection is one of the most powerful loyalty-binding forces in human psychology. When you are fully known, you can be fully evaluated. When you remain partially unknown, the human brain fills in the gaps with what it wants to see. Carl Jung identified the psychological function of projection as a fundamental process of the unconscious mind. We assign our unacknowledged desires and fears onto others. The less information you provide, the more space exists for that projection. You become a screen, and people fall in love with screens. Galileo understood the political dimension of this. He revealed his findings strategically, not completely. He knew that full exposure without protective ambiguity was dangerous. Partial revelation, showing enough to create fascination but withholding enough to require continued engagement, was the architecture of his influence with patrons. When he miscalculated and showed too much too fast, he lost protection and faced the Inquisition. Mystery in his world was survival. In yours, it is leverage. Your practical instruction: remove one layer of visibility from your life. One platform you over-explain on. One relationship where you fill every silence. One habit of oversharing that you adopted because you thought it would generate closeness. Replace explanation with implication. Replace disclosure with suggestion. Let them wonder. Wondering is the beginning of obsession. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. What remains is the part of this you may not want to hear. This path is cold. That is not a metaphor. It is a literal description of what it feels like to operate as a sovereign strategist in a world built for the emotional average. You will sit in rooms where people perform connection, and you will see the machinery beneath it. You will watch people exchange loyalty for validation and understand exactly how it is happening. And you will feel the specific loneliness of the man who sees clearly. That loneliness is real. Do not let anyone tell you it is not. Machiavelli wrote The Prince not from a position of power, but from exile. He had been accused of conspiracy, imprisoned, subjected to the strappado, a form of torture where they hang you by your wrists tied behind your back and drop you repeatedly. He lost everything he had built, and in that ruin, stripped of status and influence and comfort, He wrote with more clarity about power than any man before or since. Because when everything is taken from you, you stop performing. You stop pretending. You see. The wolf does not mourn the fact that sheep are afraid of it. It understands its nature and operates accordingly. The man who chooses this path does not pretend to be a sheep to make others comfortable. He accepts the cost, the exile, the silence, the distance. Because the alternative, performing loyalty, manufacturing warmth, pretending not to see, is the slow death of everything real inside you. This freedom is cold, but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. You watched this to the end. That is not nothing.
Most people cannot sit with discomfort for 10 minutes without reaching for something soft. You did not. That means something. Not about your potential, but about your current architecture. You are already different from the people who clicked away in the first 2 minutes. Subscribe not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being the person who waits for loyalty to appear and cannot understand why it never does. And if you want what I cannot say in public, the frameworks I do not publish, the specific case studies the algorithm would flag, the operational details behind what was outlined here, that content exists. It is not for everyone. Nothing worth having is.